Liam is a burned-out corporate drone who hasn't had a full night's rest in almost a decade, and his job feels like a non-stop survival game run by sociopaths in suits. The only reason he's still standing is thanks to the love of his wife and little girl. When he finally drags himself home from work, he's met at the door by Micah, who greets him warmly, and he asks about their daughter Kanemi. Micah says she's already asleep, but apparently she spent the whole day begging her for a dog. She saw a Shiba Inu at her friend's place, and now she's completely obsessed. Liam isn't sure they can handle the extra expense, but after taking one look at Kanemi's peaceful sleeping face, he starts thinking that maybe a pup wouldn't be such a bad idea if it would make her happy, even if he has to pick up more shifts and make it work. The following day, Liam takes Kanemi to the pet shop, and the way her eyes light up makes it all worth it. Micah is surprised that Liam actually gave in, considering how swamped he already is with work. But Liam doesn't mind. If his wife and daughter are smiling, he can deal with whatever else life throws at him. Or at least, that's what he tells himself. Back at the office, Liam's slapped with reality again. His boss is screaming at him over a missing report. Liam calmly reminds him it was submitted Thursday, but since the boss spent that day club hopping, he never saw it. Still, somehow Liam takes the blame like always. His day-to-day at work is a toxic mess. The higher-ups dump everything on him, and his underlings walk all over him, stealing credit, dodging blame, and throwing him under the bus at every chance. Still, no matter how rough it gets, walking through the front door and seeing Micah and Kanemi waiting for him always pulls him back together. But then the next day, while commuting to work on the train, Liam gets a message from his buddy Nita. Nita's going on about a brand new Gundam that just dropped and begs Liam to help grab one before it sells out. Liam laughs, thinking how Nita's still a die-hard fanboy, and decides to do him the favor. He hops off the train and pulls out Google Maps, trying to track down the store, but the area is unfamiliar, and he winds up completely turned around. As he's scanning the streets for anything recognizable, he suddenly catches a glimpse of Mika sitting across the street in an outdoor cafe, laughing and smiling with another man. At first, Liam is frozen because his brain refuses to process what the hell he's seeing. Mika had told him she was taking Kanemi to her sword training today, and yet here Mika is having fun, so he wonders what the hell is going on. That evening, Liam got home from work and casually asked Micah how her day went. She answered without hesitation, just the usual. Dropped Kanemi off at sword practice, nothing special. Liam was ready to call her out, to say what he saw, but instead, he just nodded, pretending everything was fine. He didn't want to destroy his happy family life, so he told himself there had to be some explanation. Maybe he was tired, maybe his eyes were playing tricks on him because there's no way Micah would betray him like that. The next day at work, he needed to clear his head, so he tried putting his computer into standby before heading out. But as always, the system glitched. So he shut it down completely and left for a walk. He found himself back in the same area where he'd spotted her yesterday. At first he felt a wave of relief because she wasn't there, but then he heard her voice nearby. She is on the phone laughing softly. She even brought Kanemi along, and then meets with the mysterious man. Liam tells himself the guy must be a friend, someone close, or someone Kanemi likes, until he hears his daughter call the man dad. That word hits harder than anything his boss ever threw at him. He stands still for a while, numb. Then he goes back to work like nothing happened, and keeps trying to build excuses in his head. Perhaps they're playing pretend. Perhaps this was just a very well friend who loved to play her father role when he wasn't around. But none of it made sense. Just then, his boss stormed over and started chewing him out for doing nothing. Liam calmly says his computer takes time to reboot since standby mode has been unstable, and for security reasons, he always shuts it down during breaks. The boss doesn't care and tells him he should skip his breaks altogether if he couldn't get his act together. But before he can even process that, his phone rings. It is Mika, and she tells him that Kanemi had been in a terrible accident. Without thinking, Liam bolted out of the building and rushed to the hospital. When he arrived, he asked where Kanemi was, so Micah told him she was already in surgery. A doctor soon came out and asked if they were Kanemi's parents, and both of them said yes. The doctor explained that Kanemi needed an urgent transfusion and asked for their blood types. Liam said AB positive, and Mika said O negative. The doctor nodded and told Micah to follow him. Liam steps forward confused and asks why they need Micah and not him, so the doctor replies that Kanemi is also O negative, so Liam's blood isn't compatible. While they are inside, Liam sits back down, trying to stay calm. But something doesn't add up, so he pulls out his phone and starts asking ChatGPT. After a few minutes of reading, the answer hits him hard. An AB positive parent can't have an O negative child, And it's not just rare. It's biologically impossible, so there's no doubt that Kanami isn't his daughter. Liam finally hits his breaking point, so he looks Micah dead in the eye and asks her straight up if Kanami really his daughter or not. But instead of giving him an answer, Micah flips it on him like every woman. She starts yelling that she's the one who should be angry, not him, says he's never around, that he clearly doesn't give a damn about their family. Liam tries to explain that it's his job. He's always working overtime just to keep the lights on. But Micah isn't having it. She cuts him off, calls his job pointless, and says he's stuck in a dead-end position with no promotions or raises. So how could he ever give her the kind of life she deserves? Liam is stunned, but Micah's not done. She snaps that in the entire 10 years they've been married, she's basically raised Kanami by herself. She completely ignores the fact that Kanami isn't even Liam's child, and says he's never really been part of this family anyway. Then, without a second thought, she says she's taking Kanami and leaving. Liam asks where the hell she thinks she's going, but she brushes past him and calls out to Kanami, telling her to pack up because they're leaving. He tries to stop her, but she moves away from him, so he grabs Kanami's arm in desperation, begging her not to go. He shouts that he's done everything for Kanami, that he's always tried his best. But then Kanami speaks up, scaredly saying she prefers her other dad. And just like that, every last bit of hope inside Liam collapses. The next morning, Liam drags himself into work, hollow and broken, but things somehow get worse. He's called into a meeting with his boss, who accuses him of stealing company money, and it's 50 million yen. He tries to explain, insists he didn't do it. But the logs show the transfer came from his account, using his work terminal, and the decision's already been made, and he's fired immediately. After that, Mega files for divorce, and she even has the audacity to sue him for child support for a kid that isn't even his. And since he's still being investigated for the embezzlement, Liam agrees to pay it all back to avoid going to jail. He takes the first job he can find, and it's back-breaking labor on a construction site, the kind that breaks men long before their debts are ever cleared. From here on, Liam's life becomes a slow collapse. All he has left is the occasional message from Nida. His friend sends him a cheerful update about the latest Gundam episode dropping, and for a moment Liam considers replying. He even starts typing something about watching it together like they used to. But then he stops and deletes the message because he doesn't want Nida to know just how far he's fallen. He tells himself to hang on, to push through. Maybe, just maybe, things will turn around if he works hard enough. But while he's eating lunch, he starts coughing hard and spits up blood. That's when he knows, whatever's coming next, it won't be better. At some night, Liam tries to get some rest, but the damn bloody coughing has gotten worse, and there's no point thinking about seeing a doctor because he can't afford treatment anyway. So all he can do is lie there, curled up in bed, waiting to die. But right as the last of his strength begins to leave him, a strange light appears above his bed, and it starts showing him visions. In these visions, the truth unravels. It wasn't him who stole the 50 million yen, it was his boss. The same bastard who's been sleeping with Micah. Every excuse she gave, every word about feeling unloved or neglected, was complete bullshit. She never cared about Liam, never even saw him as a real person because to her, Liam was just a wallet. She was part of the setup from the start, working with his boss to frame him for the embezzlement. Liam stares at the vision in disbelief, and his chest tightens, not from the sickness, but from the weight of betrayal. But then, a voice speaks to him, and a man appears out of the light and confirms that the vision is real. The man then asks Liam if he's really gonna just sit there and let the people who ruined his life get away with it. Liam, completely drained and broken, clenches his fists. He's had enough, and at that moment, he swears that no matter what it takes, no matter what he has to become, he'll make them pay. The man smiles, pleased by the sheer force of rage Liam is radiating, and says he's glad he showed up tonight. But he still hasn't said who he is, so Liam asks him, who the hell are you, and why are you here? The man explains that he's just someone who took an interest in Liam because despite everything, Liam stayed a decent man. But Liam doesn't care about that anymore because living a decent life left him ruined. So if he had the chance to do it again, he put himself first for once in his life. And that's exactly what the man wants to hear. So he makes Liam an offer, a chance to start over in a new world, and all Liam has to do is pick one. Liam doesn't know if he's hallucinating or really dying. But if this is real, if he truly gets to choose, then he's going all in. He remembers Nida talking about other worlds before, one where Gundams exist. That sounds good enough, so he chooses that. The man nods, says the world Liam chose is a hybrid of magic and advanced technology. One ruled by nobles and royals, where status and power decide everything. Normally, Liam might have ended up in a ditch or farm somewhere, but the man says he'll help a bit. He'll place him into the family of a count who governs an entire planet. Liam can barely believe it. For once, things might actually work out in his favor. Then, with what little life he has left, Liam signs the Isekai contract, and just like that, his soul leaves his body and heads off to a brand new world. Then we see on planet Hydra that Liam's 5th birthday has finally arrived, and his mom has put together a special celebration just for him. As part of the surprise, she calls him over and activates a levitation spell under her feet. Liam floats up after her, following closely into the next room. When they arrive, he's greeted by a massive birthday cake and a gigantic gift box right beside it. He rushes over, unwraps the present excitedly, and finds a sleek, metallic cube inside. His mom explains that it's the interface for customizing his very own AI maid. Using the cube, he can choose how she looks, what personality she has, and even pick out her specific features, like her ears, mouth, and other parts that are conveniently censored. Liam, a bit confused, asks why she's giving something like this to a 5-year-old, but she simply says it's important and doesn't elaborate. That's when his father walks in, saying he's got a birthday gift of his own. And it's not just any gift, he's offering Liam the entire Banfield estate. Liam is floored. He can't believe his father is actually ready to hand over everything to a child. He asks if his father is truly serious about making him the new count, and his dad nods. There's just one small catch. In exchange for giving up the title, he and Liam's mother want to retire quietly in a villa and live out their days stress-free. But to do that, they'll need a monthly allowance, so all Liam has to do is agree to pay them, and the title is his. Blinded by the idea of gaining power, Liam doesn't question it. He doesn't ask why any sane adult would hand an entire noble household over to a literal 5-year-old. So when his father pulls out a contract, Liam signs it immediately without reading a single word. After it's signed, his dad takes the document, says goodbye, and heads off with his wife to their villa. Liam still hasn't realized he's been completely played, but in his mind, none of that matters because he's now officially a count, and he swears to abuse that title to the fullest, so no one can ever walk all over him again. He figures none of this would have been possible without that man, so he's actually grateful for what he sees as a fresh start. Unfortunately for Liam, that mysterious man isn't exactly a benevolent spirit. In fact, he feeds off human misery, and after sending Liam off to his new life, he turns his attention back to Earth, to Mika and Liam's old boss. The two are still out at a fancy restaurant, cracking up over the whole thing. Liam's boss jokes that maybe he went a little overboard ruining the guy's life, but Mika, she doesn't feel the slightest bit guilty. According to her, Liam deserved everything that happened for wasting a decade of her life. But then, out of nowhere, the police surround Liam's former boss and slap him with an arrest warrant. The man tries to play it off like some massive misunderstanding, but the officers have already reviewed the surveillance footage showing him framing Liam for the embezzlement. There's no wiggle room left, and he's going away for a long, long time. With her precious sponsor heading off to prison, Micah's little fairy tale collapses in seconds. No more free dinners, no more easy money, just cold, quiet misery. The guide, the being who orchestrated Liam's reincarnation, savors every drop of her downfall because it's exactly the kind of delicious karma he lives for. Now all that remains is to transport Liam's soul to his new life. But this isn't about redemption because the guide doesn't want Liam to thrive. He wants him to suffer more. The plan is to drop Liam into a harsher, crueler world where lifespans stretch for centuries, meaning he'll have plenty of time to spiral into despair. And that's exactly what the guide wants because he feeds on misery after all. Over in that new world, on a distant planet, the Ghost pirate crew is in the middle of an invasion. Things are going well for them at first, until half of their soldiers suddenly blow up in a fiery mess. The pirate captain looks around in panic, and then he sees Christiana, the Princess Knight of Lebe, hovering above the battlefield. Christiana is the first daughter of the Holy Kingdom, and a walking nightmare for anyone who dares cross her people. As soon as she enters the fray, the tide of battle flips instantly. Her blade moves like lightning, and the pirates drop like flies. Even as they begin to retreat, she commands her troops to continue the assault. Mercy isn't on the menu today because they need to send a message that no one dares to touch Lebe's territory and live to talk about it. Meanwhile, back in Liam's new life, he finally receives his custom-made I made, and he's beyond hyped. The packaging looks underwhelming, basically a cube, but his butler assures him that all he has to do is touch it to activate the unit. As soon as he does, the box opens and a humanoid form lands gracefully on the floor. She introduces herself as Meiji, and the butler officially informs Liam that she'll be serving as his personal assistant from now on. She requires weekly maintenance, but aside from that, she's fully operational around the clock for anything Liam needs. But Liam isn't really paying attention to the technical rundown. He's already halfway around her, eyeing her design like a man inspecting a luxury car. The butler cautiously asks what the hell he's doing, and Liam, without shame, admits he's just confirming whether the custom specifications he ordered were delivered as promised. The butler is horrified and tries to remind Liam to act appropriately in front of others, but Liam just nods and then immediately asks Meiji to follow him to his room for a full, hands-on examination in private. And seeing that shit, the butler sighs in silent despair, deeply concerned about what this innocent young master is about to become. A few hours later, Liam is relaxing while Meiji gives him a shoulder massage. The butler steps in, asking what hell on earth they've been doing in here. Liam tells him not to stress. Sure, he looks like a little kid, but mentally he's 36. The butler isn't impressed and tells him 36 still counts as a baby around here. That totally throws Liam off, so Meiji jumps in and explains that in this world, people live around 600 years. Most don't even get considered adults until they hit 100. Liam is stunned. He had no clue lifespans were that insane here, but honestly he's not mad about it. It just means more time to try everything this world has to offer, and if he could keep Meiji by his side through it all, that'd be even better. But the butler gives him a heads up, and it's probably not smart to get too attached to Meiji. People in the Empire don't exactly love AI, and if word gets out that he's treating an AI like family, rumors are going to spread fast, and not the good kind. Liam didn't understand why AI were so despised, so he asked the butler to explain. He told Liam that a long time ago, AI nearly wiped out humanity in the Great Scannet War. People were enslaved, nearly erased, but in the end, a group of brave humans fought back and reclaimed their freedom. That group later formed the foundations of the Empire, so it wasn't surprising that nobles still carry a deep grudge against anything artificial. But if that was all true, Liam didn't understand why his mother would give him an AI as a birthday gift. The butler hesitates at first, saying he's not supposed to talk about it. But Liam's not just a kid anymore, he's the Count now, so he pulls rank and orders the truth out of him. The butler gave in and revealed that Liam's parents had already abandoned him and fled. Liam asked what they were running from, and the butler explained that they left him with the entire debt of the Banfield family so they wouldn't have to deal with it themselves. Turns out, Liam's great-grandpa Alistair was a respected figure who accomplished a lot and built up the Banfield name. But Liam's father ruined everything. Once he took control of the family, he mismanaged everything and dragged the Banfield name into ruin. Now the family was drowning in debt, had lost all rights to farmable land in the frontier territories, and barely had any tax revenue left from industry. There was no feasible way to pay it all back. Liam had inherited a title, but it came with nothing but problems. Somewhere else on planet Hydra, a small group of locals are hanging out in a dimly lit bar, tossing back drinks and grumbling about the new leadership. Word on the street is that their fresh new lord is a literal 5-year-old. One guy at the table starts ranting about how much he can't stand this territory anymore. He remembers the last time they got a new ruler. Taxes went up for no damn reason, and nobody could do a thing about it. All they can do now is hope that this time around, things don't go straight to hell again. Back at the estate, Liam is still trying to process everything. If the Banfield domain has been broke for ages, why would his parents dump all of it on a 5-year-old kid? That's when the ugly truth clicks. Maybe that's why they even had him in the first place. Just to make him the fall guy for their mess. In his past life, he was mistreated, used up, and discarded like trash. But this time, he promised himself that no one was going to use him and throw him away again. He turns to Meiji and asks her to join forces with him to build a future where he's in control. Meiji accepts immediately, saying that serving Liam gave her a real sense of purpose. For the first time, Liam felt like he had someone he could count on without question, and that thought brought him genuine comfort. He was looking forward to what they could accomplish together. But before they start working on his empire, Liam figures he should lay down a few ground rules, his own version of the classic robot laws. He starts with the standard: Meiji must never harm a human being. But halfway through saying it, he stops and rethinks it. Honestly, he doesn't give a damn about the rest of humanity. So instead, he crafts his own personal version of the rules. Rule 1, Meiji must never hurt him, no matter what. Rule 2, she has to follow every order he gives, as long as it doesn't break Rule 1. And Rule 3, she's allowed to protect herself, as long as it doesn't go against the first two. With that settled, Liam turns to Meiji and tells her he's serious about rebuilding the Banfield territory. But since he's still pretty clueless about how this world operates, he asks if she's got any solid ideas to get things rolling. Meiji runs a quick data search through her systems and eventually comes up with a potential solution. Before sharing it though, if she gives Liam a heads up, it might clash with the Empire's traditional values since her logic is AI-based. Still, she's fully capable of providing high-level support when it comes to managing a domain. Hearing this, Liam admits he knows shit about how any of this works, so Meiji suggests he start with an education capsule. It's a high-tech pod that can upload 10 years worth of knowledge into your brain in just half a year. Not only that, but it also enhances your physical condition while you're inside. Basically, it's like a hyper-efficient training simulator. Liam thinks it sounds perfect, but he's concerned about what will happen to the territory while he's out of commission. After a quick pause, he decides to give Meiji temporary command while he's out of commission. Brian, the old butler, immediately freaks out. He's clearly not on board with handing over the reins to an AI, but Liam brushes off the concern. He says Meiji would never mess anything up unless he told her to, and technically there's no law stopping an AI from stepping in temporarily. So for now, Liam is placing everything under her care. Soon after, the capsule is ready and Liam prepares to dive in. But right before he enters, there's something he wants to ask Meiji. He looks at her and asks if she can actually feel emotions, or anything close to it. Meiji replies that she isn't entirely certain, but when Liam asked her to be his partner earlier, her internal logs triggered a memory cache overflow, which in simple terms means it made her happy. Hearing that brings a smile to Liam's face, so he thanks her again and reminds her that he's trusting her with everything. Then without hesitation, he steps into the capsule and begins his accelerated training. The scene shifts and time has clearly marched on. Liam's intensive training has finally concluded, and the capsule slowly unlocks with a mechanical hiss. As the lid rises, the first person he sees is Meiji, standing calmly in wait. Without wasting a second, Liam asks the question weighing on his mind. How long was he in there? Meiji meets his gaze and answers plainly. It's been 2 full years since the day the capsule was sealed. Once he gets changed, she gives him a detailed update on how things have been running in the Banfield domain, and to his relief, everything's gone off without a hitch. Liam thanks Meiji for managing things so smoothly while he was away. He says he'd like to go out and see the territory with his own eyes, so Meiji decides to take him on a tour, starting with the battleship docks. It's Liam's first time seeing the place in person, and the thing that really catches his attention is the fleet of battle suits. Curious, he asks if he can test one out, and Meiji is more than happy to set that up. She explains that the suit runs on neural prompts, and it responds to the user's thoughts. So as long as he imagines a movement, the system will carry it out. Liam gives it a try, and once the suit powers on, he starts walking around in it. Impressed, he mentions that he wishes he could spar with someone while using it, and Meiji tells him that can easily be arranged. A few minutes later, Mashida, the planet's defense chief, shows up to be his sparring partner. The mock duel kicks off with Liam rushing in to land the first strike. Mashida blocks the hit, but then dramatically pretends to lose. His acting isn't exactly Oscar-worthy, and Liam instantly realizes the guy is holding back. He doesn't appreciate being humored, so he orders Mashida to go all in. Since it's a direct order, Mashida has no choice but to comply. Liam then charges again, but this time Mashida grabs the blade mid-swing, disarms him in a flash, and sends him tumbling. Liam can't believe how fast he got taken down, so Meiji explains that the suit responds based on what the user can clearly visualize, and since Mashida has years of battle experience, his control is far more precise. Embarrassed and frustrated by the loss, Liam tells Brian to find him a professional combat instructor immediately. Brian tries to reason with him, saying there's really no need for a lord to personally learn how to fight. But Liam shuts that down fast. In his last life, he was stepped on by people stronger than him, and if he's going to rule this time around, and rule with authority, then he's going to make Dan sure he can protect himself. Not long after, Liam gets introduced to a man named Yasushi, a supposed master of the Way of the Flash. Liam is over the moon. He thinks Yasushi looks like a total badass, so he instantly introduces himself and says he wants Yasushi to be his swordsmanship teacher. Yasushi agrees right away, which makes Liam even more excited. But Meiji doesn't share his enthusiasm. She thinks Yasushi is shady as hell. Liam doesn't exactly deny that, but since the guy looks like an old-school samurai, he's willing to let it slide. Still, Meiji asks him to at least confirm that Yasushi is the real deal before bringing him on as a full-time instructor. Liam agrees, so he asks Yasushi to do a little demo to prove his skills. Yasushi nods and leads them to a quiet clearing in the forest, where several wooden posts are already lined up. Before he begins, he announces that he's about to show them his secret technique, the legendary way of the Flash. He also says he'll never demonstrate this move again, so Liam better pay close attention. Liam, wanting to capture every detail, tells Meiji to start recording. Yasushi steps into position, slowly draws his blade just an inch, and then instantly sheaths it again. In the next blink, every post in the clearing splits clean in half. Liam's jaw practically hits the ground because the move looks impossible. He turns to Meiji and asks her to play the footage back in slow-mo to see exactly what happened. But no matter how much she slows it down, Yasushi's sword never visibly leaves its sheath. Liam assumes that Yasushi must have been moving so fast that Meiji's cameras couldn't keep up with him, so he's even more convinced that Yasushi is amazing and asks to become his disciple. Later that night, Yasushi heads back to the same clearing, grinning to himself. He can't believe Liam actually bought it. All he did was pre-cut the pillars earlier so they'd fall apart after the slightest nudge. Basically an internet shorts trick. Now, thanks to some flashy misdirection, he's locked in a sweet job with a noble's paycheck, and he doesn't even have to lift a finger. Meanwhile, on the far side of space, Princess Christiana arrives for a peace negotiation with the Go's pirates. Go's was the one who suggested the truce, but the second she steps on board, he mocks her for showing up alone. But Christiana, unshaken, tells him she didn't come alone, and if anything happens to her, the entire Allied fleet is ready to vaporize his ship on the spot. She thought this would give her the upper hand, but Go's doesn't flinch because he knows the Alliance isn't as loyal to her as she thinks. Right then, Christiana gets a distress signal. Pirates have breached her homeworld's defenses. She's stunned because the planetary shield should have made that impossible. But Go's just grins and explains that the alliance she worked so hard to build isn't as solid as she thought. Some of the member nations were all too eager to flip sides once Go's tossed a few incentives their way. Seconds later, her crew radios in with an update. Every allied ship nearby has turned their cannons on her. She's speechless because somehow Go's has flipped her entire army against her, so with her back against the wall, Christiana has no choice but to hear Go's out. Meanwhile, on Liam's side of the galaxy, training with Yasushi is kicking his ass. He's been swinging swords for years now, and still he can't pull off the legendary way of the Flash technique. He turns to Meiji, hoping for some kind of tip or workaround, but she admits she doesn't have much insight into that move. After all, she's an AI, not a swordsman. For the past 3 years, Yasushi has only had Liam drilling the fundamentals over and over, and while that's improved his overall combatability, as Amaji points out, Liam couldn't care less. Because he doesn't just want to be good, he wants a signature move that turns heads. Later that night, Yasushi is chilling in his room, flipping through some manga, still in disbelief that he's managed to coast this long. Sure, he's a fraud, but he's not completely useless because he knows enough about sword basics to fake it. And for the past 3 years, he's taught Liam entry-level techniques while raking in a stupid amount of money. So if everything goes well, he's hoping this scam runs for a few more years. But that dream nearly ends when Liam walks in and asks him, dead serious, to finally teach him the way of the Flash. Yasushi immediately panics and blurts out that he's resigning. He claims that since he already demonstrated the move once, there's nothing more to show, and if Liam isn't satisfied, there's no point in continuing as his instructor. But instead of firing back, Liam drops to his knees and sincerely begs Yasushi to forgive him for stepping out of line. Yasushi reluctantly agrees to let it slide, warning him not to make the same mistake again. Once Liam leaves the room, Yasushi exhales hard, genuinely rattled. That was way too close. He knows damn well he can't teach Liam a move he made up on the fly. Then, just as he starts to relax, Liam pops back in. Yasushi panics for a second, thinking he's been caught red-handed, but Liam just came to say he'll be out tomorrow and won't be able to train. Meanwhile, Christiana is being held prisoner aboard the Go's pirate ship, locked inside the captain's private quarters. She demands to know what he plans to do with her, and Go's just grins, saying he wanted her to have the best seat in the house. She's confused until he gives the command for every ship under his flag to aim their cannons at her homeworld. The moment she realizes what's about to happen, Christiana panics and pleads with him to stop. But Go's couldn't care less. He gives the order to fire, and Christiana is forced to watch as her planet is wiped out before her eyes. Back on Liam's side of the galaxy, he's still stressing over the fact that he hasn't been able to pull off the flashy sword move yet, but he's got responsibilities to handle, so he tells Meiji to hit him with the monthly status update. She pulls up a bunch of charts outlining the current condition of the Banfield domain. The debt situation is still just as ugly, but there's been a bit of consistent growth in production and development. Liam's relieved that things aren't going completely off the rails, and he compliments Meiji on her efforts. but she says she's actually disappointed. Based on the size of their recent investments, especially in public welfare, the returns should have been way higher by now. Curious, Liam asks to see the breakdown for the welfare budget, and thanks to his prior life of crunching numbers non-stop, he catches the issue instantly. Something is fishy, so he tells Meiji to bring in the noble managing that department, and soon enough, some noble who looks like a hungry pig comes in. Liam doesn't even bother playing nice, so he gives the guy one shot to explain himself. The noble tries to play dumb, but Liam lays it out. The financial records have been tampered with. The invoices don't add up, so it's clear the guy has been skimming money off the top. And what he thought was a clever cover-up is painfully obvious to someone who spent years digging through corporate expense sheets. Liam also questions the vendor change, and the noble claims the new vendor was more efficient, but that doesn't explain why the results have tanked. So it's obvious that he made the change to get a cut from a vendor he controls. But strangely, Liam isn't all that pissed because deep down, he expected corruption. In fact, he came to this world hoping to become the type of corrupt noble people whisper about. And if he wants to become a true villainous lord, he needs to use his position like this pig did. Right then, Meiji alerts Liam that the noble had actually been under investigation before for embezzlement, and Liam's shocked the guy still has his job. But the noble quickly explains that the case was wrapped up and blamed on his subordinate instead. Liam turns to Meiji for confirmation, and she says it's true that the official report pins the blame on the subordinate, but no real evidence was presented. In fact, the noble had the man executed shortly after. Liam's seen this kind of tactic before, and he calls the noble out on it. He accuses him of setting up the fall guy just to save his own neck. The noble panics and starts babbling, and denies everything, but Liam's not buying any shit comes from his pig mouth, so he picks up his sword and starts walking toward the shitless pig. The noble starts pleading, trying to talk his way out of it, by claiming that this kind of thing is standard procedure, and all the nobles do it because it's just how the game is played. But Liam's had enough, and he's about to swing when Meiji steps in and tells him to stop. The noble, thinking he's got an opening, starts shouting that Liam's just a kid and doesn't understand how the world really works. But before he can get another word out, Liam's sword flashes, and his head hits the floor. Still shaking with adrenaline, Liam gives a furious order. He wants Meiji to investigate every single noble on the planet and execute every corrupt one she finds. Meiji tells him that he needs to cool off first, and since this is Liam's first time actually killing someone, his body is frozen with tension, and he can't even release the grip on his sword. Meiji gently helps loosen his hand, and when it comes to his earlier order, she explains that wiping out all the corrupt nobles would create a major problem. Pretty much all of them are dirty, so killing them all would leave the entire administration in chaos. But as a compromise, she proposes setting up a batch of AI dolls to take over the nobles' administrative roles, and Liam trusts her judgment and gives the go-ahead. Later, back at the battlesuit hangar, Liam is itching to get back into training. Now that he's gotten a solid grasp of sword basics, he wants to try again in a suit. But before he can get started, Yasushi strolls in and tells him that no real warrior would ever use one of those default automated suits because they're too reliant on AI. So Liam asks Moshida if there's another option. That's when he's told about a special battlesuit, one that belonged to his great-grandfather Alistair. It's a rare relic, but it's fully manual, and no one before him or after has even been able to get it to function, and that makes Liam want it badly. Sometime later, we see that Yasushi ends up wandering through a dusty old shrine, poking around for anything worth grabbing, all while muttering under his breath about how damn annoying it is that Liam's actually making real progress. This whole so-called training was supposed to be a total scam, just a way to milk him dry, and Yasushi knows deep down he can't keep stringing Liam along forever, and if he wants to keep the money flowing, he's gonna have to come up with even more useless crap to throw at him. As he absent-mindedly leans against the wall, he accidentally triggers a hidden mechanism that reveals a mobile knight, ancient and worn. But for Yasushi, this rusty relic is exactly what he needs to keep the money flowing and Liam distracted. Meanwhile, somewhere on Earth, the malevolent entity known as the Guide continues his hunt for negative emotions. He stumbles across a man losing his mind at a Starbucks because the cream that was on his cappuccino sticks to the cup lid, and that shit makes him mad. The Guide savors the bitterness radiating from the guy's petty tantrum, but finds himself craving something richer, something more exquisite. Back in Liam's world, Yasushi has already tasked Liam with restoring the ancient mobile knight, now named Avid, as part of his so-called training. Eager to take on the challenge, Liam throws himself into mastering his master's completely bogus technique, the Flash, while his ever-loyal butler Brian watches. Although Brian is secretly thrilled that Avid used to belong to Liam's great-great-grandfather, he can't help voicing his doubts. He insists that Liam would be wasting his time messing around with such a primitive machine, but Liam remains unfazed, confident that if he can learn to master one of the oldest models ever built, his piloting skills will become unmatched. Brian, being the nosy busybody he always is, tells Liam to stop wasting energy on Yasoshi's ridiculous technique, calling it complete nonsense. Still, Liam is determined to give it everything he's got, believing that effort and perseverance will lead to real growth. Meanwhile, Meiji arrives at the site where Avid is being kept and immediately voices her suspicion about Yasoshi and his so-called teachings. She doubts Yasoshi is even a real swordsman to begin with, but orders are orders, and since Liam personally assigned her to repair Avid, she has no choice but to roll up her sleeves and do whatever it takes to bring this ancient heap of scrap metal back to working condition. Shortly after, Lieutenant Nias Carlin, a weapons factory engineer, arrives with her crew at Liam's territory to handle the repairs on Avid. Liam personally goes to meet her at the spaceport to wish her luck, and while they're chatting, Nias spots Meiji standing quietly beside him. She instantly wonders what a sophisticated AI doll is doing hanging around a noble like Liam. Liam gets a little pissed at her reaction and immediately snaps back, telling her that he has every right to own an AI doll and won't tolerate anyone judging his lifestyle choices. But he completely misreads the situation because in reality, Nias is an absolute android fanatic, and she completely nerds out the moment she gets a good look at Meiji. Nias is blown away by the custom features built into Meiji, and without any shame, she starts poking and prodding her like a total creep. She even tries to lift Meiji's skirt out of pure excitement, but Liam quickly intervenes, warning her that this area is a high military secret and he doesn't want anyone to see it. After that awkward moment, they move to the warehouse where Avid is being stored. One look at the battered machine and Nias bluntly declares that it's pretty much scrap metal. She strongly recommends that Liam ditch this piece of junk and just buy a brand new model instead of wasting a fortune fixing it. But Liam is having none of that. He firmly tells her that he doesn't want any of her factory's standard issue garbage, and the only unit he intends to ride is Avid, no matter what. Nias sighs, explaining that bringing Avid back to life is going to be an absolute nightmare. Not only are there no replacement parts available, but the thing is way larger than a typical mobile knight, meaning repairs will cost Liam a small fortune. But money isn't an issue for Liam, and he quickly comes up with a solution. He tells Nias to retrofit Avid using parts from newer models. That way, the output should be even better than before. However, there's one thing he won't compromise on. Since Yasoshi strictly ordered him to learn piloting without relying on modern conveniences, Liam makes it clear that all the automatic support functions must be stripped out, so he wants full manual control, no exceptions. Before heading out, Liam also throws in one final special request. He wants Avid to have a rocket punch, a detachable flying fist attack, because in Liam's mind, no ancient machine is complete without it. Right around that time, Yasoshi strolls into the warehouse to check on the progress being made with Avid's restoration. But the moment his eyes land on Nias, he's frozen in place, completely smitten at first sight. This shameless perv finds her so stunning in all the wrong ways that his nose instantly starts bleeding. Trying to save face, he hurriedly wipes the blood, straightens his posture, and confidently strides over to introduce himself. Unfortunately for him, Nias is way too engrossed in her conversation with Liam to even notice he exists. Undeterred, Yasoshi keeps trying, cheerfully introducing himself and even boldly asking her out on a date. But once again, Nias brushes him off without sparing him a single glance. She's far more interested in explaining to Liam why his ridiculous idea of adding special moves to Avid is absolutely out of the question. Liam, being Liam, counters by casually offering her as much money as she wants to get the job done, and at that, Nias immediately caves. After all, her real goal from the start was to squeeze as much cash as possible out of Liam. Yasoshi, burning with jealousy watching Liam and his fated one chatting like they're starring in some rom-com, quietly vows revenge, and since he can't exactly sabotage Liam directly, he decides to punish him with an even more brutal and ridiculous training regimen. This time, his brilliant idea is to have Liam train completely blindfolded. He drags Liam out onto a river and makes him stand on a slippery log, struggling just to keep his balance. And while Liam tries to stay upright, Yasoshi gleefully fires off a barrage of tennis balls using a custom-made launcher. It's pretty clear Yasoshi is just venting his personal grudge for stealing his would-be girlfriend, but he masks it under the excuse that this new torture will sharpen Liam's swordsmanship. Liam, getting pelted by tennis balls while trying not to fall into the river, groans about how ridiculously heavy his weighted sword feels, but following his master's crazy instructions, he keeps practicing, determined to dodge the incoming tennis balls using only his mind's eye. Meanwhile, aboard the pirate flagship, Commander Goes strolls down into the prison cells, where he reveals he's been keeping dozens of captured women, including Princess Christiana herself. He doesn't bother explaining anything to the prisoners. He simply orders Christiana to step forward, announcing that they finally arrived at their destination, the Treasure Island. Goes leers at Christiana, getting far too close as he tells her that she's so beautiful that just looking at her makes his whole body shudder with excitement. Then, without warning, he drags her to the ship's laboratory, where his deranged assistant awaits, and flings open the door to a nearby room, revealing a horrifying sight. One of his earlier pets, a woman so mutilated and defiled she hardly looks human anymore. With a cruel laugh, Goes tosses the broken woman out of the ship like garbage and turns his full attention back to Christiana. He announces that she will be his next project, his new prized pet. With no need to rush, Goes gleefully begins brainstorming ways to modify his new toy. His assistant offers a few sadistic ideas, like slicing off her legs to cripple her permanently. But Goes, ever the creative lunatic, comes up with an even sicker plan. He wants to gouge out Christiana's eyes and graft them onto her palms. Trapped in this nightmare, Christiana looks around in terror, spotting rows of test tubes filled with other mutilated victims. So unless a miracle happens, she knows she won't escape this hell. Meanwhile, back at Liam's estate, a few weeks have passed, and Nias finally finishes repairing Avid, stuffing it full of customizations based on Liam's wild requests. But there's still one last step, so Nias brings Liam into Avid's cockpit to show him the basics of operating it. And of course, being Nias, she can't resist getting a little wild, pulling her top halfway down under the pretense of needing more freedom to instruct him properly. Liam, doing his absolute best not to look, awkwardly follows her instructions and powers up the ancient mobile knight. Avid immediately scans him and locks him in as its sole recognized pilot, meaning no one else can use it from now on. Feeling hyped, Liam tries to take his first step and immediately faceplants, toppling the whole much over. So Nias reminds him that Avid doesn't have any modern conveniences like automatic balancing systems, and unlike newer models, piloting this beast won't be as easy as pressing a forward button. However, there's a huge benefit. If Liam can master controlling Avid manually, it'll be like moving his own body. Feeling fired up, Liam pulls himself up and manages to walk forward again, this time keeping his balance on Avid a lot better. He pilots the unit out of the warehouse, and while he's practicing, Nias reminds him how crucial it is to maintain a solid mental image to control the mobile knight properly. She moves in closer to adjust some of his controls, but her massive melon ends up bordering him by accident, completely throwing off Liam's mental focus. And that shit makes the robot start moving its hands in a very weird way, as if it's reaching out gently to hold something it really shouldn't. Nias instantly catches on to what kind of mental image Liam must be having, giving him a suspicious glare. Liam quickly tries to defend himself, insisting that it wasn't his fault. On the ground, Yasushi is observing all this from afar, and he's absolutely convinced that Liam is misusing his power inside the cockpit to do some shady moves with Nias. Brian, however, is wiping tears from his eyes, thrilled that his master is finally showing some normal, healthy interest in a real woman, not a robot. Yasushi, on the other hand, is burning with jealousy and curses Liam under his breath, swearing to make his training even more grueling. As the days roll by, Liam still struggles to execute his master's so-called secret technique, doubting if he even has the talent for it. Meiji, who's been quietly skeptical for a while, finally speaks up and suggests that maybe the real problem isn't with Liam, but with Yasushi's sketchy teaching methods. Liam, being the loyal student he is, refuses to doubt his master. Instead, he brainstorms a theory. Maybe the secret behind Yasushi's ultimate move isn't pure swordsmanship, it's magic. Liam figures that it's the magic power, not the sword itself, that actually slices the logs. So he starts imagining that he's channeling his mana into his sword and keeps swinging it again and again with the intent to cut the log using magical power. Through endless practice, days turn into months, and months blur into years, and he finally succeeds in mastering a secret technique that technically should never have existed. Now fully grown and stronger than ever, Liam proudly shows off his achievement to Yasushi by slicing a wooden log clean in half from a long distance away with a single swing of his sword. Yasushi on the inside is losing his mind. His made-up teachings were never supposed to amount to anything, so seeing Liam pull off this impossible feat terrifies him to the core. But keeping his face perfectly calm, Yasushi just nods sagely and tells Liam he still has a long way to go before he truly masters the technique. A few weeks later, Liam finds himself in space aboard his battleship alongside Meiji when he receives an urgent report from one of his subordinates. Apparently, Muke, and it's a small, abandoned planet within Liam's territory that had only been used for energy production, has come under attack by a pirate fleet. The small military force stationed there is doing its best to fend off the enemy's mobile knights, but the subordinate doubts they'll be able to hold out much longer given their limited numbers. Meiji then quickly steps in, proposing that they strike the pirates from Muke's blind spot by utilizing gravity wells and natural space terrain to their advantage. Liam likes her plan and immediately orders his fleet to move in and capture the pirates, while he personally volunteers to defend the planet on the front lines. Brian, overhearing this, pleads with Liam not to risk his life so recklessly, but Liam, fueled by pride and determination, refuses to back down. In his eyes, he's no coward. He's a true swordsman, trained by the legendary samurai himself, and he's determined to show the Empire the power he's cultivated. Then, without hesitation, Liam jumps into his mobile Knight Avid and rockets toward Muke. Launching a surprise assault from the pirates' blind spot, he tears through their forces, slicing apart enemy mobile knights before they even realize what hit them. Within moments, Liam cuts down their numbers significantly, and to add some flair, he activates his beaming rifle, sending a searing plasma beam straight through one of the enemy units. Not stopping there, Liam follows up with his secret move, the Way of the Flash, slicing apart dozens more enemies from a distance. The pirates, overwhelmed and terrified by the ferocity of his attack, quickly begin retreating toward their ships. Seizing the opportunity, Liam fires off his rocket punch, a special move where Avid's fist launches out at high speed toward the enemy. While the move works as intended, Liam is less than impressed. So mid-battle, he radios Niaz to complain, rumbling that he wanted a throwable fist, not a full-on punching missile. Then their conversation gets interrupted when Meiji chimes in, reporting that despite their efforts, they'd only managed to capture less than 10% of the enemy fleet, and about 30% of the ships were destroyed during the assault, while the rest managed to escape. Even so, Liam considers the operation a solid victory, and he praises the Vice Commander Meiji for doing a great job in her role. Meanwhile, Goes had just received the news that the pirate crew he'd dispatched to plunder the Banfield resource planet had totally botched the job, and he was seething with rage. The scientist, who has looked a lot like Dr. Frankenstein, calmly explained that the crew had seriously underestimated how powerful the Banfield forces actually were, leaving them no choice but to retreat before the whole damn fleet got obliterated. Sure, it sounded like a logical decision, but Goes wasn't having that shit. He outright decided every pirate who ran was going to be executed because he wasn't about to let cowards stay alive in his ranks. And once he dealt with them, he planned to send a message by personally finishing the job himself. Since he'd be gone for a while, he told Christiana, who was now looking so creepy and barely recognizable, that he'd return later to play with her again. At the same time, Liam and his fleet had just gotten back from their battle, and Liam was pretty damn satisfied with how things turned out. They had defended the resource planet, and as a bonus, captured several pirate ships. According to Imperial law, if you seized a pirate ship, everything on board, including the ship itself, legally belonged to you. Luckily, the pirate ships they took were packed with stolen treasure, and the moment Liam heard treasure, he immediately imagined piles of gold and diamonds, but Brian told him the haul was worth way more than that shit. After counting everything up, Meiji reported the ships were full of rare metals like orichalcum and adamantite, but Liam wasn't impressed. Those metals were only useful for making weapons, and he had been hoping for something fancier, maybe a diamond-studded crown or some flashy treasure. Brian didn't understand why, since diamonds in this world were worthless shiny rocks, and compared to orichalcum and adamantite, diamonds and gold meant nothing. But Liam didn't care, he still wanted gold, seeing how stuck he was on it. Brian informed him they'd found some gold too, and the moment Liam heard that, he ordered Brian to melt the gold down and make as many gold coins as possible. Brian then asked if Liam wanted to mint coins from the other metals too, but Liam wasn't that reckless. He wanted those saved for making weapons for his army. But Meiji interrupted with a serious issue. They didn't even have a blacksmith who could handle those kinds of metals. On top of that, Meiji had something else to report. After running diagnostics on the Banfield military's fleet, about 10,000 ships total, he discovered that most of the ships were useless. In fact, when the order was given to mobilize against the pirates, only 30% of the fleet was actually able to fight. Liam was honestly surprised they'd managed to pull off a victory against the pirates with only 30% of their fleet operational, But really that was just because the pirates had underrated them. To the rest of the Empire, Banfield territory still looked like a backwater, dirt-poor region, so naturally the pirates assumed it'd be a cakewalk to raid the Banfield resource planet. And under normal circumstances, it probably would have been right, but Liam's insane mech piloting skills completely flipped the script on them. Even so, Liam knew if the pirates came back with a full-scale assault, there was no way in hell they'd survive in their current state. Liam hated the fact that over 70% of his ships were useless junk, so Meiji offered up a suggestion. Maybe it was time to ditch all the broken ships. Brian immediately pushed back, arguing that if they scrapped the non-functional ships, their military strength stats would tank, and they'd end up looking like an effortless target. Sure, that was a valid point, but keeping all those busted ships around wasn't cheap either. The maintenance costs alone were gonna be a damn headache, and Liam had zero interest in throwing money down the drain, so he sided with Meiji. To calm Brian's worries, Meiji suggested they could simply buy new ships to replace the ones they were dumping. And since they'd gotten their hands on all those rare metals from the pirate ships, selling them off should cover the cost of building a brand new fleet. In other words, there is no problem with money. Meanwhile, Niaz was busy giving a presentation, proudly unveiling her latest ship design. She was hyped about it because she'd managed to boost the output by 7%, while also improving the ship's responsiveness and making it easier to maintain. She promised that if her ships were approved, the Imperial Army's fleet would end up stronger than ever. Then came the next presentation, led by Lieutenant Ulysses Morisil, representing the 3rd Weapons Factory. Her new ship model wasn't designed for pure combat. It was pitched as a luxury cruise liner. It had all the style and class of a high-end hotel, packed with entertainment options and leisure spaces to make sure the crew enjoyed every damn second on board. Sure, Nias' ships were way better in terms of firepower, but they didn't come with an indoor golf course and a jacuzzi. And apparently that mattered because the Imperial Army decided to buy from Ulysses rather than her. Nias tried to argue her design was stronger since she poured every resource into maxing out its performance, but Ulysses countered that her ships were just as capable in battle. Besides, strength wasn't all about weapons. A ship's power also depended on the crew running it, and if that crew could kick back at an onboard bar after a tough mission, they'd be way more willing to fight their hearts out the next day. As they walked out of the conference hall, Ulysses couldn't help but gloat about the Empire choosing her design over Nias's. But Nias wasn't backing down. Sure, she'd lost this round, but she swore this wasn't over. She was determined to prove her ship was stronger when it came to a real battle. The problem was, she'd already blown her entire damn budget on this project, and unless she somehow found someone crazy enough to buy all her unsold ships, she was gonna have to declare bankruptcy. Not like there was anyone dumb enough to buy a ship design the Imperial Army had straight up rejected. Then it hit her, she did know someone. If Liam was willing to pour money into repairing an old busted mech, then hell, he'd probably have no problem buying a fleet of unpopular ships. Meanwhile, the guide had been spending most of his time back on Earth, screwing with people to soak up their misery. But honestly, none of that compared to the suffering Liam had to be going through right now. The last time the guide saw Liam, he dumped him in another world with garbage parents who left him saddled with their debt. So he expected Liam's life and territory to be a complete disaster by now. But to his shock when he checked in, the planet was somehow thriving, so the guide was pissed because his entire plan to make Liam suffer had gone up in flames. But he still had one more thing to check. When Liam asked for a swordsmanship teacher, the guide had intentionally sent him Yasushi, a total fraud who couldn't swing a sword to save his life. So there was no way in hell Liam had learned any shit legit from that clown. Meanwhile, in a local bar, some of the townsfolk were chatting about how damn good the economy had gotten under Liam's rule. Everyone seemed grateful to have Liam as their lord, but while they were praising him, Yasushi sat quietly, thinking Liam was a freaking monster. Yasushi knew he was a fraud. He'd been giving Liam impossible tasks over and over just to keep up the act, hoping he'd eventually fail. But somehow, Liam kept pulling them off, and he even mastered techniques Yasushi didn't think were humanly possible. The guide overheard Yasushi's words and had no idea what he was talking about. Curious, he checked in on Liam and found him in the middle of training. He watched, stunned, as Liam completely obliterated a training post without even laying a hand on it. The guide couldn't believe what he was seeing because he hadn't given Liam any cheap powers or broken skills, so everything Liam achieved had come purely from his own effort. The guide couldn't wrap his head around how things were going this damn well for Liam in a world like this, and honestly, Liam wasn't expecting it either. Getting dumped by your parents and buried in debt at 5 years old was usually the recipe for a ruined life, but somehow things had worked out. Now the economy in his territory was booming, and Liam was finally living his dream life. And ironically, all of this is thanks to the guide. All of Liam's positivity was leaving a bad taste in the guide's mouth, and honestly, he hated every damn second of it. Needing a reset, he soaked up some of Yasashi's negative emotions to calm himself down, finally regaining his composure. Now he was ready to start plotting again. Sure, Liam was doing well right now, but that just made it even sweeter because the higher you climb, the harder the fall, and the guide planned to make Liam's crash hurt like hell. At that moment, Liam was in the middle of discussing the ship situation with Meiji, wanting to know if she found any solid leads. Meiji explained that the Imperial Army was upgrading its fleet to a new model and was selling off their older ships at a discount. Even though they were outdated models, Imperial ships were still insanely powerful. Liam was totally on board with the idea of buying them, but Meiji warned him there was a catch. They'd be required to hire all the existing crew that came with the ships. Basically, the Empire was trying to dump all the unwanted soldiers along with the old ships. Hiring that many people would definitely rack up the costs, but Meiji figured their current budget could handle it. Plus, a lot of those crew members were experienced officers with valuable knowledge. Bringing them on would massively boost the strength of Liam's army, so framed like that, it sounded like a solid deal, so Liam agreed without hesitation. The guide listened in on all this and saw an opportunity. He figured he could twist this into another step in his plan to drag Liam into despair. He just need to pull a few strings, send some super earnest, upright people into Liam's ranks. And with Liam parading around as an evil lord, it'd only be a matter of time before they turned on him for his so-called tyranny. Meanwhile, Yasashi was slumped at home nursing a brutal hangover, silently wondering how the hell his life had ended up like this. But then he suddenly heard Nias's voice calling for him. He scrambled to clean himself up, quickly switching back into his act as a stoic master. Nias had been skeptical of Yasashi at first, but after watching Liam's progress under his so-called training, she was convinced he had to be some kind of skilled mentor. Yasashi was surprised she actually come to see him on her own. For a second, he even thought he might have a shot with her, but nope, she was only here to get intel about Liam. The way Nias phrased her questions, though, completely threw Yasashi off. She wanted to know how to convince Liam to hear her sales pitch, but she was nervous it'd come off rude as she just marched up and asked. So she turned to Yasashi, asking for advice on how to put a man in a good mood. Yasashi misunderstood immediately because he thought she was fishing for ways to seduce him. At the same time, he worried she'd think he was a creep if he spoke up. But when Nias practically begged him to tell her, pleading like her life depended on it, Yasashi caved. Without skipping a beat, he started rattling off every damn fantasy and scenario he'd ever dreamed up, going full throttle with all the details and source codes included. Nias stood there stunned, completely silent for a few seconds, and Yasashi started sweating, worried he might have gone way too far. But to his surprise, Nias calmly asked him if she should wear stockings too. Yasashi couldn't believe she didn't think he was a total creep after all that, but he nodded, telling her stockings were definitely a good damn idea, so Nias sincerely thanked him for the advice. A few hours later, Nias showed up at Liam's castle to see him, and she was rocking the exact outfit Yasashi had described, hoping to charm Liam into buying what she was selling. Liam might be a bit naive, but he wasn't an idiot. The second he saw her, he knew Nias was up to something, and knowing her, it was pretty damn obvious she wanted him to buy something. Nias admitted she was here to sell him the latest battleship model she'd built, but Liam shut her down immediately. Nias begged him to at least hear her out before turning her down, but Liam wasn't having it. He didn't need to listen to any sales pitch because he'd already bought a batch of used battleships from the Imperial Army, so he didn't need any more ships, period. Still desperate, Nias kept pushing, rattling off her ship specs, and honestly, they were impressive. But Liam just told her to take them back to the Imperial Army if she was so eager to sell. Nias confessed she had already tried that, but she had lost at the showcase, failing to sell a single ship. She pleaded with Liam, asking if he'd be willing to buy at least a few, just 100 or 200 ships, because it would help her tremendously. She even offered to help him get a loan if money was the issue, but Liam cut her off fast, telling her to stop right there because just the idea of going into debt again made his skin crawl. Nias was getting seriously desperate at this point. So desperate, in fact, that she started stripping right there, trying to seduce Liam into buying the ships. But all it did was remind Liam of how in his past life, his shitty wife had probably seduced his damn boss. Liam knew Nias wasn't that kind of woman, but right now she looked pitiful as hell. He sighed, figuring the fastest way to make her stop was to just agree. He asked Meiji if they had any leftover funds in the budget, and Meiji replied they could afford about 300 ships. so Liam told Nias he'd take them, and Nias was overwhelmed with gratitude, promising to deliver the ships immediately. But as she turned to leave, she tripped over her own feet and face-planted hard onto the floor. Liam had to admit, Nias was beautiful, and her design and engineering skills were top tier. But damn, sometimes she was a total mess. Out in the halls, Nias was practically bouncing with excitement as she ordered her team to prep 300 ships for delivery. Her coordinator was floored that she actually found someone willing to buy them, but Nias proudly said it was all thanks to her unbeatable charm. Meanwhile, Liam was lounging in his throne room, getting his ears cleaned by Meiji, completely relaxed because for him, everything was going just fine. Not long after, Nias showed up with all 300 battleships she pretty much bullied Liam into buying. Right around then, the fleet he ordered from the Imperial Army rolled in too. Meiji handed over the receipt through quantum teleportation and made a big deal of repeating the word quantum as she asked for his signature. Just to mess with her, Liam smugly pressed his thumb against her legendary melon, calling it his official quantum thumbprint, and honestly he felt like he'd earned the right. Meanwhile, Yasushi was lounging at home, still pissed off and thinking about how he was going to get back at Liam for repeatedly stealing Nias away from him. He thought back on Nias' entire scheme, frustrated that she'd wasted her precious charms on that brat obsessed with dolls. Imagining the things Liam must have done to poor, sweet Nias only enraged Yasushi more, and he promised himself that Liam would pay dearly. As Yasushi's rage boiled over, the guide suddenly appeared, having secretly observed and absorbed all the negativity pouring out of Yasushi. The guide was thrilled by Yasushi's anger and eagerly anticipated how it might ultimately lead to Liam's downfall. Deciding to put his faith in this scheming fraud, the guide departed to another dimension to continue harvesting negative emotions elsewhere. Nias brought Liam on board the battleship she'd built to give him a guided tour. Liam didn't have high expectations for luxury or style from someone as clueless as Nias, but even with those low standards, he found himself disappointed by the bland interior. Nias tried explaining that fancy interiors were purely decorative and had zero practical use in battle, but Liam wasn't hearing it because he wanted decorations. Nias knew there was no convincing him, and she wasn't going to install useless luxury decor either, so they just agreed to disagree and moved on to discussing how to operate the ship instead. Nias started briefing Liam on the basics of piloting the battleship, including how much power he needed to use at the start and how frequently he'd have to swap fuel. She even tried persuading him to buy a loyalty card, promising discounts on future maintenance, but Liam flat out rejected the offer. Moving on, Nias proudly showed Liam the throne installed on the bridge, which still had its protective film attached. She eagerly insisted on peeling off the film and pushed Liam to close the deal, desperately trying to use her body to charm him into signing the receipt. She even suggested he could use her legendary melon as a stamp if he wanted, but Liam seemed thoroughly unimpressed because he had already tried it before, leaving Nias wondering if he was a rainbow or something. Liam just wanted to finish this annoying conversation quickly, so he finally agreed to sign the receipt. However, still not fully satisfied, Nias then asked Liam for a favor. She wanted those pirate ships he seized the other day. Liam immediately refused, stating clearly that he intended to add those captured pirate ships to his own fleet. Nias stubbornly kept insisting like a greedy pest, so Meiji stepped in, proposing they hand over some of the pirate ships to Nias. In return, she'd have to agree to repair and upgrade the remaining vessels for them. Liam immediately loved the idea since all those pirate ships were basically scrap metal anyway, and Nias gladly accepted the offer. She admitted openly that the only reason she was so eager to get the pirate ships was because she wanted to study their technology. Apparently, the pirates used unknown tech and foreign equipment from outside the Empire, and Nias was itching to take a closer look at their hardware to improve her own designs. But before finalizing the deal, Liam decided to personally inspect the pirate ships first, taking Meiji and Nias along with him. They entered one of the few vessels still mostly intact, and Liam immediately noticed the massive difference in both design and controls. The damn thing literally had a helm, exactly like an old-fashioned pirate ship, and Liam instantly fell in love with it, so much so that he decided on the spot he wanted the same setup on his personal battleship. Nias, being the boring nerd she was, immediately launched into a long, annoying explanation about why that was a terrible idea, but Liam quickly shut her down. As a man of true culture, he made it crystal clear that if he wanted something, he was getting it, no matter how useless she thought it was. Ignoring him, Nias wandered off excitedly around the room, geeking out every time she discovered something new. As this is going on, Liam noticed a tiny glowing dog heading off toward another room, so he followed after it, accompanied by Meiji. Eventually, the dog led them straight into a navigation room. As Liam stepped inside, his footsteps activated some hidden mechanism in the floor, which projected a hologram showing the ship's previous flight paths. Meiji quickly analyzed the data, realizing this particular vessel had terrorized the entire Empire. But what interested her most was that the ship always returned to the same warp gate near the border. Apparently, that region was a lawless zone beyond the Empire's direct control, a wild area on the front line of a continuous conflict between the Empire and another nation. Liam immediately realized that this warp gate probably led directly to the pirates' hidden base, and after Meiji ran the coordinates through her systems, she pinpointed exactly where their secret hideout was located. She began rattling off a complicated scientific breakdown about how incredibly difficult the location was to reach, explaining something about bizarre orbital paths and navigation challenges, but Liam tuned her out completely. He was too busy fantasizing about what he might find there. He'd already convinced himself that it must be some secret treasure island where the pirates regularly stashed all their best loot. Of course, Liam was delusional as usual, but Meiji decided to just leave the decision up to him. Bursting with enthusiasm, Liam immediately declared that their fleet would set out right away on a grand treasure expedition. Shortly afterward, Goes received word that the debtor Liam had initiated an invasion and had attacked and crushed some of his men on the front lines. So Goes summoned these pathetic underlings, deciding they needed punishment for disgracing the pirate reputation by losing to some garbage noble. But before handling these worthless idiots, Goes ordered the rest of his crew to bring him Liam's head, dispatching every available man and deploying his entire fleet. Meanwhile, Liam and his fleet arrived at the warp gate that led directly to the pirates' secret base, but they were immediately stopped from entering because apparently, the Empire required a hefty toll for using this particular gate. The gate officer contacted Liam, explaining that since this warp gate covered an enormous distance, and considering Liam wanted to warp an entire fleet of 7,000 ships, it would cost a fortune. Liam casually promised he'd pay them back later, but the officer didn't trust Liam's word at all. Annoyed, Liam asked Meiji if they could find someone reliable to vouch for him, but unfortunately, they had no influential contacts whatsoever. Liam tried explaining his intentions again, emphasizing that he was headed to pick a fight with the pirates, but that just made the officer even more hesitant to let him through, given that Liam couldn't even guarantee he'd survive the battle, let alone make the payment afterward. Since Liam hadn't brought any actual money and had already spent several days traveling here, simply turning around wasn't an option. Frustrated, Liam demanded to speak with the officer's supervisor, but unfortunately for him, this particular officer was already the top-ranking official at the gate, so Liam just threw a tantrum and abruptly ended the communication. He quickly came up with another idea, deciding he'd try negotiating a deal with the gate officer face-to-face. While Liam struggled desperately to persuade the warp gate crew to grant him access through the Pomwonia gate without paying the toll, Goes and his own massive warship arrived at that very same gate. Unlike Liam, Goes had plenty of connections here, and even though he was clearly the villain in this scenario, he didn't have to beg anyone for access because those with the money always made the rules. When Goes contacted the warp station, a familiar gate attendant enthusiastically greeted him, asking where Goes planned to head after entering Pomwonia gate. Goes bluntly replied that he intended to travel directly to the Domus Gate. Everyone knew Domus Gate basically led nowhere useful because there was practically nothing valuable a criminal like Goes could find there. Confused, the attendant asked why he'd bother going to such a wasteland, but Goes curtly informed him that it wasn't any of his damn business. He declared that since he had the cash, he shouldn't face any hassle entering, promptly paying the required fee on the spot. At the same time, Liam showed up at the warp gate himself, thinking his usual smooth talk might finally open a path. He approached the officer confidently and asked to be let through, but the officer told him there's no problem, right before slapping him with the requirement to pay the warp fee. Liam immediately tries to flaunt his status, boasting about his noble title and promising that he can get the money, but the officer doesn't even blink. When the bragging fails, Liam shifts tactics, switching to a pitiful tone, pleading for entry like his life depends on it, but the officer stays unmoved. Doubling down on the act, Liam starts sobbing and bows dramatically, claiming he needs to visit his gravely ill mother, and this trip is urgent. The officer glances at the massive fleet Liam brought with him and deadpans. You need thousands of ships to visit your sick mom, so she must be really sick. When that excuse flops too, Liam improvises again, saying he just wants her to see his fleet one last time before she passes. The officer calmly tells him to come back once he actually has the funds, if seeing his mother is really that important. As the discussion ends, the officer receives a transmission regarding Go's travel authorization and walks off to handle that matter. Liam is fuming because he can't believe his negotiation tactics aren't working anymore. He wanders around in frustration until he notices that weird glowing dog again and follows it. Inside the warp control room, the staff notice Go's route on the monitor and immediately realize that Liam's fleet is still queued up in the waiting zone. It's clear this encounter won't be anything close to peaceful, but the real problem is they're the ones who messed up because they accepted payment from a known pirate without double-checking his destination, an oversight that could land them in serious trouble. So in classic bureaucratic fashion, they all quietly leave the control room and take a group break, hoping that by the time any chaos breaks out, they'll have plausible deniability by not being present at all. Once the room clears out, Liam finds himself there and takes a look around. He realizes it's the warp gate controls and notices Go's ship hovering near the Palmonia gate. He assumes the officer must have felt guilty and secretly gave him permission to pass and cleared the room to cover it up. But when Liam glances at the terminal again, he sees the warp paths moving in reverse directions. Figuring the guy must have made a mistake, Liam sits down and tries to fix the routing. His meddling unintentionally messes up Go's transfer path, but since the warp sequence continues as normal, Go's doesn't notice anything wrong. Out of nowhere, Meiji calls Liam and asks him to come back. When he returns, she informs him that they'd just received a letter of credibility, not from a noble house, but from Nias herself, since they've been one of her top clients. A favor repaid in full. Liam grins, clearly pleased, and notes that the officers were already willing to bend the rules, but now that they got formal backing, getting through should be no problem at all. He gives Meiji the go-ahead to enter the wormhole, and she follows the order without question. Their journey toward the Palmonia gate begins, and lucky for them, Go's and his crew had just cleared out of their base, completely unaware of what's coming. Meanwhile, Go's is getting irritated. He was supposed to arrive at the Doma's gate within 30 minutes, but the trip has dragged on far too long. He turns to the crew member piloting the vessel, who also looks worried, but they eventually spot a gate up ahead and assume they've reached their destination. Unaware of Liam's interference with the warp system, they proceed through it. But the moment they arrive, they're greeted with a sea of red alert lights. Dozens of warships sit primed and ready, weapons hot. They've stumbled straight into an Imperial Army defense zone. It's game over for them, but it's a massive win for Liam. Back on Liam's end, he finally arrives at his target location. Meiji suggests verifying the coordinates, but Liam waves it off because he doesn't need confirmation. The sheer number of pirate ships sitting idle in the distance makes it obvious that they found the hidden treasure island. Meiji scans the area and confirms that none of the ships are currently powered up. They're caught totally off guard, completely unprepared for battle, so Liam doesn't hesitate. He seizes the moment and orders Meiji to initiate the attack. She deploys their warships while Liam hops into his mech, and within seconds, he begins bombarding the base, sending missiles raining down on the island. He lets loose his signature rocket punch to obliterate the pirate ships in one swoop, then follows up with the Avid Crush technique to pulverize the rest. And these freaking attacks set enemy ships one by one, so Meiji report that the entire enemy fleet has been torched, but Liam isn't satisfied yet. He's not here just to cause chaos, he came for the pirate horde, and that's what he's after, so he commands Meiji to deploy the mobile knights. She does so without delay, sending them all toward the massive rock-like island ahead. Liam watches the operation from his vessel, eyes gleaming, fully fired up for the treasure hunt that's about to begin. And within seconds, Liam and his unit of Mecha Knights launch a full-scale assault on the treasure planet, blasting straight through its armored exterior to force their way in. Deep within the facility, the unhinged scientist starts to lose it as Liam's relentless attack shreds through the last scraps of their defense system. He bolts to the control room, only to find out they're under full invasion, and every single pirate ship guarding the orbit has already been obliterated. At the same time, Liam pushes deeper into the core of the base and runs straight into a squad of pirates piloting combat mechs. He wastes no time cutting them down, and by the time his unit captain arrives, Liam's already finished clearing the room. The captain informs him that their side has secured the area too, and Liam instructs them to keep pushing forward while searching for the treasure vault. Just then, he spots the glowing dog again and decides to follow it. Turns out that was the right move because it leads him straight to the main control hub, where the scientist and his crew immediately throw their hands up in surrender. Satisfied with how smoothly things are going, Liam demands that the scientist hand over every last bit of treasure. Frankenstein responds by asking what kind of loot he's after. Money, loot, or the exotic pets that pirate Captain Go's was so fond of. Liam guesses the glowing dog must have been one of those pets, so he asks for more details. The scientist, misinterpreting Liam's interest, assumes he's just another sadist like Goes, obsessed with turning people into obedient animals, and offers to condition the pets to follow Liam's every order. Liam has no idea what the hell this lunatic is rambling about, so the scientist decides to show him personally. He leads the group into his lab and proudly unveils his so-called creations, girls who've been mutilated and warped through horrific experiments. One of Liam's soldiers immediately hurls from the site, unable to stomach it. As the squad captain berates the man for being soft, Liam walks forward and stops dead when he sees one particular girl. The scientist lights up and explains that Liam has good taste because this one was Go's most prized possession, his ultimate work. He keeps bragging about how this girl is his masterpiece, but Liam's expression darkens. Memories of his former life of being treated like garbage, dehumanized, flash through his mind, and he feels something snap. Without a word, while the scientist is still going off, Liam raises his weapon and puts a bullet through his skull, and that was the end of Frankenstein. Liam then starts scanning the lab, but then a haunting voice calls out, and it turns out to be Christiana, the mutated girl with eyes embedded in her palms. She quietly asks who he is, and Liam introduces himself, stating plainly that the planet now belongs to him and the madman who ran it is dead. Upon hearing that, Christiana begins sobbing, thinking that maybe, just maybe, her nightmare is finally coming to an end. Through tears, she begs Liam to put her out of her misery, along with the others, because none of them can return to a normal life after what's been done to them. But Liam doesn't waver. He tells her that he's going to save every single one of them, and in return, he expects them to repay the favor someday. With that, he turns to leave, telling his troops to call in the medics and start transporting the girls back to the ship for treatment. Christiana cries out again, begging him to reconsider, knowing full well that there's no way to reverse the horrors they've suffered. The squad captain feels sorry for her but follows orders anyway. He gently tries to reason with Liam, explaining that healing the girls would require an entire biological rebuild, meaning rare elixirs and light medical specialists. The process would be insanely expensive, and in his eyes, saving them just isn't worth the cost. But Liam brushes that off and simply says he's in a good mood today, and doing something decent every now and then won't kill him. Right on cue, Meiji contacts him to report that they found the real treasure vault, and Liam grins at the timing, because now they got the funds to pay for the girl's treatment. At the same time, Christiana continues weeping, her voice trembling as she reflects on everything she's lost. She used to be the Princess Knight of the Holy Kingdom, a national hero, respected and admired for her victories against pirate factions. But the day she confronted Goes and his crew, they lured her into a trap and took her hostage. Right after that, she watched in horror as they obliterated her homeworld in front of her eyes. Her family had trusted the protective barrier from the United Alliance to hold, but it became clear they'd been betrayed. The defenses failed, and in the blink of an eye, her entire planet vanished in a storm of fire and dust. Christiana's world had already shattered, but her nightmare was far from over. After annihilating her homeland, Goes brought her and the remaining survivors to his so-called Treasure Island. Her squadmates were terrified beyond words, but Christiana held on to whatever hope she had left, reassuring them that anyone would come to their rescue, and she refused to believe their fate was sealed. When Goes finally showed up, Christiana met him with defiance. She told him to end her life right then and there if that was what he wanted, because she would rather die than be degraded and toyed with. But Goes simply laughed, saying that if killing her was the goal, he'd have done it already. He made it clear that the only reason any of them were still alive was because he planned to add every last one of them to his personal collection. Then, with a twisted grin, he announced that he was in a generous mood and he'd let one girl go free, but he demanded that Christiana choose. Cornered and unsure what to do, she picked the girl who looked the most terrified, thinking she might be sparing her. But it was all a cruel setup, because the moment she spoke the girl's name, Goes handed her over to the scientist who looked like Gollum, who gleefully dragged her away to be the first test subject. The grotesque scientist transformed into a multi-limbed abomination and began slicing the girl open while she screamed. Christiana went mad with horror and begged for it to stop, but Goes just laughed in her face, telling her that if he stopped now, the girl would die. Completely broken, Christiana had to watch as the girl she tried to save was turned into a twisted, unrecognizable creature. Goes leaned in and whispered that this was just the beginning, and he promised that Christiana would become something far more beautiful. Shaking, she demanded to know how someone could take joy in this, and he answered without hesitation, it was pure satisfaction. Goes said life had been cruel to him, cursing him with an ugly face, so he takes that pain and twists beautiful women into monsters. So watching them crumble from the inside out was his idea of fun. Then he forced her into the operating chair, and all of Christiana's strength vanished. She begged, she cried. She promised anything, obedience, loyalty, submission, if he would just let her go. But Goz told her that this was exactly what he wanted. He'd saved her for last on purpose because he wanted to see her fall the hardest, suffer the longest. He then ordered Gollum to rip out her eyes and embed them in her palms, so that even without a mirror, she could always see the monster she had become. No one listened to her screams, and just like that, Christiana was mutated beyond recognition, cursed to be his prized pet. And then one by one, the rest of her girls were dragged in to share the same fate. Back on his home turf, Liam has just returned from the pirate raid when Nea shows up at his estate. She heard about his win at the pirate base and immediately starts pitching her next scheme. She wants him to buy even more battleships to celebrate the victory. Liam tells her to knock it off with the money grabs, but Neas argues that her battleships played a big role in the raid's success, and since Liam scored a massive payday, he should throw some cash back into her products. She tries pulling the same old flirt and tease routine again, but Liam's not buying it this time and tells her to shut her damn mouth. When seduction fails and even her low-key threats fall flat, she reminds him that she's the one who secured him access to the warp gate in the first place, and that finally gets Liam to stop and listen for now. He turns to Meiji and asks how many ships they can actually afford with the treasure haul. She calculates everything and explains that after cutting out the necessary costs, they can still purchase up to 5,000 ships. Liam's jaw practically hits the floor, but before he can process it, Nias bolts out the room yelling that she's going to prep the 5,000 unit order right now. Liam dashes after her in a panic, trying to stop the damn lunatic before she actually places that massive order. Elsewhere in the palace, Yasushi is wandering through the halls, trying to come up with a new excuse to squeeze some more funding out of Liam. Right then, he spots Nias strolling past while on a video call, proudly telling her colleague that she just locked down a major sale from Liam by selling out every last scrap of her pride. As usual, Yasushi misreads the situation completely and assumes Liam is treating Nias like a personal toy again, and he gets fired up, which makes the lurking guide extremely happy since he's been waiting around hoping Liam will slip into some darker emotions. Meanwhile, Liam is busy searching for Nias, but Yasushi runs into him first and calls him over. He brings Liam to the training field, where things immediately go downhill. Liam is blindfolded, handed an absurdly heavy sword, and told to get ready for another one of Yasushi's insane training routines. This time, dozens of drones circle him and fire tennis balls at breakneck speed from all directions. Liam doesn't stand a chance and keeps getting nailed, and just when it couldn't get worse, Yasushi dials up the intensity again. Liam drops to the ground, groaning that there's no way he can defend against everything using just one blade. But Yasushi isn't interested in excuses. He tells Liam to shut up and figure it out for himself. So Liam figures that maybe it's time to try magic again, just like he did before, but this time he flips the script and uses it for defense. He focuses, shapes his energy, and bam, he forms a solid barrier without breaking a sweat. The tennis balls start bouncing off it like flies on glass, and Yasushi just stares, completely stunned, while Liam says that he finally gets it. And without missing a beat, he tweaks the spell and reflects every single ball right back to the drones that fired them, and in seconds, the entire swarm gets wrecked. He whips off his blindfold and turns to Yasushi, asking proudly if he passed, but Yasushi, who's been nailed by several stray shots, is too stunned to respond. He starts panicking, realizing Liam might actually be a freaking prodigy, and it's only a matter of time before he uncovers the whole scam. He already took out crooked officers and smashed pirate fleets, so the day he figures out Yasushi's been bluffing this whole time is the day Yasushi's head ends up on a spike. So he tells himself he's gotta bail before it's too late and casually starts sneaking away. Liam notices and asks where the hell he's going, and Yasushi, trying to save face, says there's nothing left to teach. He tells Liam he's learned everything there is, and from here on out, he just needs to follow his own path because true swordsmanship never ends. Liam protests, yelling that he doesn't want things to end here, and he still wants to train, but Yasushi snaps back, saying Liam needs to stop acting like a spoiled brat. He claims he's still a student himself, always learning, and if Liam keeps clinging to him like this, it'll just hold them both back. Then he spins around with this dramatic flair and declares that Liam has officially graduated. He's now a true wielder of the Way of the Flash, and as a proper successor, it's his job to spread their sword style across the universe. Liam nods with full pride and honor, saying he'll carry on the teachings with everything he's got, and the second he turns his back, Yasushi bolts like his life depends on it. Liam, on the other hand, feels more satisfied than ever. His debt is going down, his territory is thriving, he's defeated pirates, and now even his master has acknowledged him. So he turns to the sky and offers his thanks to the guide for everything. The pervy gremlin, hearing that, immediately warps out to another realm before Liam's Dan good vibes obliterate him for good. Days go by, and Liam again starts feeling that familiar emptiness creeping back in. Frustrated, he vents to both Brian and Meiji, going on about how cruel and unjust his past life had been, and how, now that he's risen as the most feared evil lord in this world, he's going to make the whole damn world pay for what he went through. Meiji completely misreads his dramatic monologue, nodding enthusiastically in agreement, except in her mind, she's thinking about all the unpaid debts he still hasn't settled. Liam casually brushes her off, promising he'll pay them later. Right now, he's far too focused on relishing his life as an evil lord. To truly enjoy this life, Liam knows he needs 3 things: power, money, and above all, a harem filled with beautiful women. He already has power, being an exceptionally skilled, certified master swordsman, so next on his list is money. As if on cue, Merchant Thomas arrives to congratulate Liam on his victory against the pirates. To celebrate, Thomas brings Liam's favorite thing, heaps of gold. Liam is immediately delighted, though he senses there's a catch. Curious, he asks Thomas what he really wants. Thomas candidly explains that his merchant crew needs to traverse dangerous territory and requests Liam's fleet, exactly 100 ships, as escorts. Liam glances at Meiji, who confirms that such a fleet is ready. Liam agrees to lend Thomas the ships, but subtly hints that next time, Thomas should bring even more gold. After their meeting, Thomas and his assistant drive through a bustling major city in Banfield territory. Thomas is genuinely amazed by how prosperous and advanced the place has become in just a few years, all thanks to Liam investing most of the territory's taxes into development. He openly praises Liam as a wise and effective ruler, though he's slightly puzzled by Liam's odd obsession with gold. Still, gold being relatively inexpensive, Thomas shrugs off his curiosity and simply hopes their prosperous relationship continues. Back in his lavish mansion, Liam hands over the fresh gold bars to Meiji, instructing her to convert them into gold coins and even gold bats, filled to the brim. Sitting regally upon his throne, Liam revels in his newfound wealth, thrilled that he's finally accepted a bribe, exactly what a true evil lord would do. Now sufficiently wealthy, he realizes he no longer needs to worry about money. With power and riches secured, there's just one final thing missing from his perfect evil lifestyle, and it's a magnificent harem. Immediately inspired, Liam decides to remodel a massive hall in his mansion into the perfect harem chamber, completing his vision for a life of ultimate indulgence. Brian doesn't even try questioning his choices anymore and simply accepts it, fully aware he's plotting another new crazy idea again. Liam then explains his vision to install a swimming pool filled entirely with liquor, hang meats everywhere, scatter fruit all over, and obviously station attractive women around every corner like living art. Meiji cuts him off, but Liam insists that his desires are not up for debate before she can mention how over-the-top his idea is. However, Meiji quickly clarifies she isn't concerned about Liam blowing a huge fortune on pointless decorations. Her real issue is the plan to fill a pool with booze, which she points out could be hazardous due to alcohol vapors filling the space. Upon hearing about the risk of fire or explosions, Liam briefly wonders if he needs to rethink his idea. Meiji continues by explaining how disgusting it would be to drink alcohol from a pool, and before Liam can object, she delves into an overly technical explanation that eventually convinces him his idea isn't practical. Brian finally chimes in as well, outlining precisely why hanging meat isn't feasible, and after an extensive explanation, Liam at last understands just how absurd and questionable his whole plan is. Nevertheless, he's determined to build himself a harem, and when both Meiji and Brian shockingly agree to let him indulge in as many women as he wants, Liam finds himself genuinely taken aback. Apparently, he had forgotten how influential and authoritative he truly is, and since many others in similar positions have harems, it's perfectly reasonable for Liam to have his own. Brian then launches into another long-winded lecture, reminding Liam how he assumed he had zero interest in women and was embarrassingly drawn only to artificial dolls, confessing the idea of Liam having no hair made him deeply worried. The old man starts aggressively pushing Liam to produce an hair immediately before pirates or some other threat eliminate him, but Liam brushes him off, fully focused instead on establishing his harem, deciding he'll include 100 women. Yet, upon learning that 100 women is considered a modest number in this society, Liam seeks Meiji's backing, and she insists Liam should aim for at least 1,000. Liam suddenly freaks out and ditches the whole plan, deciding to stick with Meiji as his one and only. But after a lengthy talk from Brian, he caves and insists he'll exclusively pick girls who can't stand him, because that's how real bad guys roll. With that twisted logic, he storms into the city and heads straight for his first target. But the moment she lays eyes on him, the girl totally falls for him. He freezes up, completely grossed out, especially when she flashes a nose balloon, some idiotic trend that's apparently hot right now. Disgusted, Liam bolts back to his mansion and instantly issues a ban on the nose balloon, calling it one of the biggest turnoffs ever invented. Later, during a beach visit, he spots women completely covered from head to toe, and that's when it hits him. This planet has terrible fashion sense. So he decides to make fixing that his next big mission and tells Meiji to bring in a team of elite designers. But Meiji says revamping fashion alone would bust their yearly budget, causing Liam to shelve the idea and seek another solution. Considering importing gorgeous girls from other worlds, Meiji counters that Liam's estate already employs the territory's finest beauties, leaving no reason to import extras. However, Liam refuses to approach them, since his whole goal is to find ladies uninterested in him. Meiji then assumes Liam secretly prefers men, but is just embarrassed to admit it out loud. That shit makes Liam immediately offended, because that's not it at all, and desperate to prove her wrong, he starts plotting his next move. Meanwhile, Christiana, thanks to advanced medical treatment on this planet, returns fully to her natural body. She believes she's dreaming, but she never wants this dream to fade. Hearing from the doctor that Liam funded the elixir, a legendary medicine used to regenerate her and the other rescued captives, fills her with emotion. Nonetheless, she recalls Liam's instruction that she has to repay his kindness someday and wonders whether she'll ever get the chance to properly thank her hero and settle that debt. At the same time, the locals pack into the pub once again, chatting over drinks about how much their lives have turned around lately, and every word about Liam is glowing with praise. They talk about how he crushed the pirates and took their ships, which were then repurposed to quickly expand the town's infrastructure. And now everyone's got a job. Folks are so busy with work that spare time has become a luxury. The city's booming, the people are content, and to them, Liam's nothing short of an incredible ruler. The guide sits there fuming. He anticipated that Liam would be ruling over a town without any inheritance or funds, and he'd be impoverished and making the residents suffer terribly. That way, the guide would gain not only Liam's misery, but also misery from the townspeople. He leaves the place for another group, expecting to finally see some dissatisfaction. He visits the commander who was demoted from the Imperial Army and sent to Liam's squad. Instead of feeling resentment towards themselves or Liam, they're completely content. They mention they find serving Liam far more enjoyable compared to their previous time with the Imperial forces. Under Liam, they feel free and independent, as if they're truly respected. They admit he genuinely is the greatest lord, and despite his young age, he is extremely wise. Upon hearing this again, the guide is filled with despair. He brought them there expecting they'd be bitter and frustrated, thus inciting rebellion against Liam. Instead, they're openly pledging allegiance, so it's utter nonsense. Elsewhere, Yasushi has finally fled to an area even farther from Liam, praying Liam won't come after him, and that he'll face no trouble. He still worries Liam will eventually discover his deception and retaliate against him. While consumed by these fears, he listens to the broadcast and hears Liam receiving praise for his victory over the pirates. During Liam's speech, he mentions that his abilities come entirely from his mentor Yasushi, who trained him in the way of the Flash. When Yasushi hears that, fresh anxiety sweeps over him again, making him terrified Liam might locate him later. The guide arrives at the same time, witnessing Yasushi receiving praise. When he introduced Yasushi to Liam, his intent was for Yasushi to be an imposter, leaving Liam with no real training, so he's utterly frustrated. Then we see that eventually, Goz manages to flee back to his pirate crew after a brutal clash with the Imperial Army, wondering how things spiraled so badly. Fortunately for him, he requests a status report on his fleet, and is relieved to hear several ships are still intact. He questions what exactly happened at the Domus Gate, and how they encountered the Imperial Army instead of Banfield's fleet. He suspects someone betrayed him at Domus Gate and immediately plans to retaliate. That's when the guide shows up, finally spotting someone he could manipulate against Liam. He reminds Goz that Liam was the one who demolished his pirate force, emphasizing that if there's anyone worth confronting, it must be Liam. Goz heeds the advice and resolves to strike Liam once his fleet is repaired. Meanwhile, innocent Liam lounges at home, delighting in the services of his maids, from serving him food to gently cooling each bite before it reaches him. But he still feels unfulfilled. He remains convinced that to truly be a wicked lord, he must embody greater evil than he currently does. Meiji notices his dissatisfaction and wonders aloud what else he desires. She proposes various options to fulfill him, but Liam dismisses them all. When she suggests perhaps he desires additional wives, Liam asks her if that wouldn't upset her. But she gently reminds him she's merely a robot and thus has no emotions, and her only purpose is his happiness. He worries multiple wives might upset her despite her insistence she can't experience hurt feelings. She then asks if he'd prefer extra robots instead, cautioning that Brian might object, but Liam disregards Brian's feelings entirely. The next day, Meiji presents an overview of their outstanding debts, highlighting how much they've already cleared and how significantly their interest rates have dropped because of these payments. Liam appreciates his current situation, but he's still restless. His true ambition isn't being an excellent lord, he wants to become a villain. Unfortunately, he's forced to consider the city's welfare simply so he can generate sufficient revenue to repay his obligations. Meiji then casually asks what he actually wants to do as an evil lord, and he says his dream is to raise taxes and drain every citizen's life dry. In her opinion, that's a terrible idea. Doing something like that would damage their economy, leaving less money flowing around to handle their debts. He acknowledges she makes sense, but it's a mature response, and frankly, he doesn't care. However, he does pause to appreciate how nice life feels right now, especially with her by his side, so he agrees to keep living like this for a bit longer until all their debts are cleared. Previously, he'd instructed Meiji to create a bunch of robot maids, and 3 of these maids complain that there's literally nothing to do in the mansion because no one needs them around, so consequently, they spend their days cleaning areas nobody cares about. One maid mentions how she changed her hairstyle to match another colleague, amazed that Liam noticed her anyway, despite them having identical appearances. She treasures a recording of the moment Liam recognized her and proudly announces she's saving it. The other 2 consider copying her idea, but Meiji arrives to scold them. She deletes the recording, reminding them that robots are technically outlawed, and if they keep trying to attract Liam's notice or grow too close to him, it could seriously damage his reputation. One maid asks if Meiji's own closeness to Liam doesn't harm his reputation too. Meiji admits it's equally damaging but points out she has no say, since that's exactly what Liam wishes. After she leaves, the robots quietly wonder if Meiji's actual intention is just to keep Liam all to herself. Then we see Brian suddenly burst in bearing terrible news, announcing that Goz has officially declared war against their territory. He summons the advisors immediately to come up with a response plan. They explain what Goz demands from them: a ton of money, attractive men, and pretty women. And if they're provided, he'll spare their city. Liam grows troubled, and Brian believes he's upset because Liam genuinely cares about the people, but in truth, he's bothered because Goz sounds exactly like the kind of evil lord he wants to become. He mentally compares his own arsenal to Goz's strength and realizes he seems weaker by comparison. He considers fighting, but reflecting on it, Goz's bounty really isn't high enough to justify the hassle. While they're discussing, time abruptly pauses and the guide suddenly appears. The guide recognizes Liam is hesitating about the battle, so he steps in to convince Liam, insisting that Goz's pirate fleet holds vast treasure, and defeating him would grant Liam both immense wealth and prestige. Liam assumes the guide genuinely cares about his success, so after the guide vanishes, he confidently declares they'll go to war, shocking every advisor in the room. Soon enough, everything's in place, but Brian is still freaking out because right when things in their territory were finally starting to be sturdy, they're suddenly charging straight into a war with the freaking pirates. Meiji, however, tells him to relax, reminding him they haven't lost a damn thing yet, and insists that Liam made the right move by choosing to stand and fight, no question about it. Brian snaps back, reminding her that she was the one who ran the numbers and said they've only got a 4% chance of winning. But Meiji counters by saying that based on her info, Goz's pirate gang completely obliterates entire planets, even if they surrender. She argues that even a slim 4% chance of victory is better than giving up outright, and Brian laments that Liam should have been born 100 years earlier, because then he would have had enough time to prepare properly to wipe these guys out. Of course, Liam thinks preparation is for wimps and real men put their lives at stake on the battlefield. He eagerly leads his fleet to confront the pirates, thanking them for giving him another opportunity to quickly gain both fortune and glory. Meanwhile, the guide is certain Liam is about to lose badly, and he's hoping Goz turns Liam into one of his pets, so he'll suffer even more. After all, Liam brought this on himself because he's the fool who trusted the guide, even after all the pain and betrayal from his past life. Now the guide is just sitting back, waiting for that trust and gratitude to rot into rage and despair because those are the emotions he feeds on. At the same time, Goz receives word that Liam and his fleet are heading straight towards him, making him incredibly hyped at the chance to utterly crush him. He announces a generous reward for anyone who manages to capture Liam alive, because Goz fully intends to turn Liam into his personal plaything afterward. On Liam's side, his soldiers aren't entirely confident about the upcoming battle, but they still believe in him. Liam, on the other hand, quickly grows bored as 3 whole days pass without any action starting. He complains loudly, wondering why they can't just start firing at each other already, and his crew informs him the war is already underway, though at this stage it's mostly strategic maneuvering. They explain that they're already at a significant disadvantage because of the enemy's superior numbers, but Liam can't grasp how that's even possible before any actual combat has occurred. He points out that they haven't even seen the enemy yet, and the captain informs him that in space, actually seeing enemy ships counts as close-range combat. Liam doesn't care for all this military jargon because he's creating some explosive action, declaring they should just rush straight forward. Right then, their radar alerts him about incoming enemy forces, and the crew quickly confirms 500 hostile ships appearing above their position. Liam wonders aloud why the pirates would bother sending only 500 ships against them. The crew explains to him that these ships seem to be soldiers who surrendered to the pirates and joined their ranks simply to survive. They're expendable pieces sent forward as a distraction, intended to force Liam's fleet into breaking formation. Liam is furious at Goz for treating even his lowest-ranking crew members like disposable pawns, but as soon as the enemy ships attack, Liam swiftly destroys them. But that brief clash opens up a small hole in the defense line, and seizing the opportunity, Goz instructs his fleet to rush forward. Seeing this, Liam's forces begin pulling back, causing Goz to believe they're retreating in fear. His fleet eagerly pursues them, but then the frontline ships unexpectedly collide with mines hidden through magic. The resulting blasts damage the vessels, but Goz isn't concerned given how large his forces are. He commands the frontline ships to clear the rest of the mines by intentionally ramming them, infuriating Liam even further. Shortly thereafter, both sides begin exchanging fire, but Goz's fleet deploys barrier ships to shield themselves. Liam's fleet starts sustaining damage, prompting the army officers to activate a similar barrier around their flagship. Liam demands to know what's going on, and the officers explain they're adopting the enemy's tactics to protect him. However, Liam grows angry, worried about the vanguard, which would remain exposed and vulnerable beyond the barrier. The officer insists that their highest priority is Liam's safety, and they'll gladly sacrifice as many troops as necessary. He tries convincing Liam that if they stick with this strategy and stall the fight, reinforcements from the Imperial Army might arrive. Liam rejects this outright, declaring himself a ruthless lord who takes everything by force and never lets go of what he claims is his. He proclaims that the ships and soldiers battling in the front lines are all his property, and he won't allow anyone to sacrifice what belongs to him without his permission. He demands that none of his troops sacrifice themselves simply to protect him or buy more time, because that's not his way. He announces they will annihilate the pirates immediately, and he'll personally step onto the battlefield to lead his troops. Liam instructs Meiji to ready his mecha armor, and when the military officer tries to protest, Liam swiftly demotes him, appointing Meiji as fleet commander instead. Meiji instantly springs into action, swiftly calculating the optimal plan for victory. She commands all ships to push forward at once, leaving the army officers baffled. But Liam just orders them to obey his maid robot without question, because she's the commander now, and with that, he heads off to gear up for the fight. In the meantime, Meiji takes command, ordering all vessels to charge forward at maximum velocity and follow her instructions closely. The military officers argue it's reckless to let a robot control their fleet, especially since she's pushing their flagship to the front line, but Meiji explains that once Liam joins the battle personally, they no longer have to shield it. Instead, she proposes using it to support Liam directly, since it's the most powerful ship they have, and the senior commanders admire her quick thinking and devotion. They endorse her strategy, and as the fleet accelerates forward, Liam launches into space as well. He then activates a short-distance warp, teleporting directly into the heart of the pirate fleet, and Goz wonders if Liam plans a suicide run to inflict damage by detonating one ship. He orders his crew to target and blast the ship emerging from the warp gate, but to his astonishment, only Liam appears in his mecha suit. Liam effortlessly evades fire from the pirate vessels and starts obliterating them, right as his own fleet arrives at the battlefield. They immediately open fire on the pirate ships and deploy their mecha units, prompting Goz to launch his own mecha squad in response. Yet Liam utterly overwhelms them, slicing effortlessly through their ranks and summoning his plasma cannons to bombard the pirate ships. Due to Liam's relentless assault, the pirate formation begins to collapse, and Meiji spots a vulnerability. She commands the fleet to charge directly through the pirate's center, while the mecha units continue battling each other. Liam exhausts the ammunition of his plasma cannons when suddenly a high-ranked pirate knight confronts him. Liam chooses to entertain himself with this fresh adversary who can provide more challenge, and as their blades clash, Liam notices the knight's impressive skill. The pirate knight, equally impressed by Liam's swordplay, asks what school he trained in. Liam proudly declares he's trained in the Way of the Flash, the greatest sword style known, but the pirate knight replies that in all his extensive experience as a warrior, he's never heard of such a technique. Calling the Way of the Flash a sham sword style pushes Liam over the edge, so he unleashes his ultimate strike against the pirate knight, instantly ending him, though immediately regrets it, realizing that if he eliminates his opponents with a single attack, no one will survive to spread legends about how amazing the Way of the Flash truly is. Right then, additional pirate knights encircle him, loudly bragging that for a broke noble, he's incredibly strong. Being called poor immediately enrages Liam, and he releases his special attack once again, annihilating them instantly. He keeps spamming this move, rapidly wiping out dozens of enemy knights, but soon his mecha suit warns him that overuse has severely damaged its right arm. Liam realizes his armor can't handle repeated use of his ultimate technique, just as another wave of enemy knights appears to engage him. They relentlessly strike from every angle, and Liam soon gets cornered after losing all his defenses. His soldiers also start getting overwhelmed, and Meiji's calculations now indicate they have barely a 1% probability of victory. Despite knowing this, Liam keeps desperately fighting with everything he's got, but it isn't enough, and soon he's about to be overwhelmed by the enemy. But just then, backup arrives and the enemy knights behind Liam get destroyed in a single blow. Liam wonders who exactly has entered the fight, and as the explosions subside, he spots Princess Christiana, recently rescued and piloting her mecha knight. Although her rehabilitation hasn't fully concluded, she's eager to repay Liam's kindness by assisting him, and her personal elite squadron is fully behind her. Her unit arrives on the battlefield shortly afterward, and Christiana commands them to eliminate the enemy forces. They immediately start decimating enemy knights and even their ships, and Christiana proves that beneath her attractive exterior, she's a wild maniac who genuinely enjoys wrecking pirates. Liam admires her abilities, yet he doesn't like anyone outshining him, so he retrieves his rocket punch and instead of firing it, he attaches it directly to his mecha, using it as his replacement arm. As soon as he regains control, Liam spots a spaceship fragment and uses his laser to swiftly convert it into an enormous sword. Now equipped with a stronger arm and his gigantic sword, Liam unleashes a far more devastating variant of his special attack at the pirates, destroying their mecha knights and even entire battleships. His single strike completely breaks apart the pirates' formation and leaves them trembling in fear, prompting Meiji to recalculate their victory probability as having risen to 83%. She instructs her fleet to concentrate their assault on a single flank of the enemy fleet, and meanwhile, Liam discards his single-use giant arm. He summons yet another sword and charges directly at Goz's flagship, determined to capture him and spread his fame across the entire universe. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the recap and are excited for the next episode, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our daily recaps.